Welcome to this explainer. We usually think of plants as little more than biological background scenery, right? Passive, quiet, and literally rooted to the spot. But what if I told you the green world all around us is actually constantly sensing, calculating, and even remembering? So let's kick things off with a pretty mind blowing question. Without a brain, without a single neuron, is it possible for a plant to actually do math? It sounds totally like science fiction, I know, but the biological data we're going to look at today, it might completely change how you look at the potted fern sitting on your desk. Here's the game plan for today's beginner-friendly lesson. First, we'll meet the smart plants. Then we'll dive into math and the flytrap, learning to ignore, memory in the wild, the invisible machinery making it all happen, and finally, the great plant debate. Section 1. Meet the smart plants, beyond the roots. We are starting with behaviors that completely shatter our typical understanding of passive, motionless flora. Moving right along to Section 2. Math and the flytrap, counting for survival. Let's look at how the famous Venus flytrap actually uses a strictly logical algorithm to catch its prey in nutrient-poor soil. Okay, so here's how this little green hunter actually counts. Picture a bug landing on a Venus flytrap and brushing against these tiny hair-like triggers. Now, the trap doesn't just slam shut right away. That first touch, it's just a primer, step one. The plant literally waits. It needs a second touch within exactly 20 seconds to snap shut. And get this, the math doesn't even stop there. Step 3 shows that it demands a third touch from that struggling insect before it actually releases its digestive juices. It's a hyper-efficient, step-by-step algorithm. And honestly, what's really incredible about this whole setup is the plant's built-in timer. It holds that initial trigger signal in its memory for precisely 20 seconds before just wiping the slate clean. Why? Well, to prevent false alarms. Think about random raindrops or falling debris. If that second touch doesn't happen within the 20-second window, the plant resets. Closing that trap takes a ton of energy, and it absolutely refuses to waste it on a false alarm. Section 3. Learning to ignore. The classroom of nature. Now we'll check out the Mimosa pudica, often called the sensitive plant, to see how flora deal with repetitive, annoying distractions. To really get this, we need to understand habituation. Think of habituation like being a student in a classroom with a really loud ticking clock, or maybe living right next to train tracks. At first, it's super startling, right? But eventually, your brain just tunes it out so you can focus. It turns out, researchers have found that plants do the exact same thing to conserve their energy. Look at this context-dependent logic the mimosa has. In lab and field tests, when researchers simulated a harmful bug munching on the leaves, the plant clamped shut and stayed on high alert, zero habituation. But when they used a non-harmful stimulus like repeating water drops, the plant eventually just reopened its leaves and completely ignored it. It literally learned the difference between a real dangerous threat and a totally harmless annoyance. How cool is that? Section 4. Memory in the wild. Remembering the past. Because the real million-dollar question here is, do these learned behaviors actually stick around, or are they just quick, fleeting reactions? To figure that out, scientists headed to Costa Rica to study wild mimosa plants in their natural habitat. And they proved that these wild plants retain a long-term memory of those past, non-harmful events. When the researchers came back to the exact same plants up to 15 days later and bothered them again, the plants remembered. They adapted their behavior and ignored the harmless tapping way faster than plants that had never been touched before. And memory isn't just about touch either. Plants literally remember the seasons through a fascinating process called vernalization. Lots of plants store an epigenetic memory of the winter cold. They physically have to experience and remember a long freezing chill just to know that spring has officially arrived. It's how they make sure they bloom at the absolute perfect time. Which brings us to Section 5. How do they do it? The invisible machinery. Because we really need to ask, how on earth do brainless plants pull off these crazy feats of memory, counting, and logic without a single brain cell? Well, a massive piece of the puzzle is calcium signaling networks. Since plants don't have neurons like we do, they use calcium ions. You can think of these kind of like biological tripwires. So when a plant gets stressed, say by a freezing breeze or a hungry predator, it triggers this rush of calcium that acts just like a line of falling dominoes. This chemical and electrical pulse literally ripples through the plant's cells, passing the warning message from one leaf all the way to the next. Now, don't let the complex alphabet soup on this diagram freak you out. The core concept is beautifully simple. When environmental stress hits, parts of the plant cell, organelles like sensory plastids and mitochondria, act as the first responders. They fire off chemical stress signals straight into the cell's nucleus, and this actually alters the plant's DNA expression through epigenetic changes. It's physically rewriting the plant's code to lock in a memory of that stress. Section 6. The Great Plant Debate. Are they conscious? Because all of these amazing mechanisms lead straight into a raging, heavily polarizing controversy right now in the modern scientific community. On one side of the fence, we've got scientists like evolutionary ecologist Monica Gagliano. She points to that incredible associative learning in peas and the habituation we just saw in mimosa plants as proof that we might be looking at this entirely wrong. She argues that just because plants don't have animal brains, well, that doesn't necessarily mean they lack their own entirely unique form of plant consciousness. But on the flip side, researcher Lincoln Ties argues pretty forcefully against that idea. He contends that what we're seeing are just highly complex, genetic, adaptive responses. Nothing more. From a purely evolutionary standpoint, he points out that true consciousness wouldn't offer any real advantage to a plant that's quite literally rooted to the ground. It would just be a massive drain on their precious energy. So the scientific community is split right down the middle. Is it true learning, or is it just complex genetic adaptation? Well, as your guide for this explainer, I'm not here to pick a side. We're just highlighting what an absolutely thrilling frontier of biology this is. You can weigh the evidence yourself and decide what you think is really going on in the soil. But, whether you want to label it intelligence, consciousness, or just a brilliant evolutionary adaptation, this biological memory has massive real-world impacts. By studying plant memory, researchers are figuring out how crops actually remember early-stage droughts. Plants that survive a dry spell become primed and are vastly better prepared to handle extreme weather later on. They even pass this stress memory down to their offspring. This could literally be the key to reducing agricultural loss and securing the future of our global food supply. So we'll wrap up today's explainer with this thought-provoking question to chew on. If a seemingly simple, brainless plant can count touches, learn to ignore a harmless rainstorm, and remember the bitter cold of winter to protect its future, what does intelligence really mean anyway? It definitely leaves you wondering about those incredible invisible networks operating in the dirt right beneath our feet. Thanks so much for joining me today, and keep questioning the world around you.